Honeybees get their food from flowers. Once there were no honeybees in America. Then early settlers brought them over from Europe. They wanted honeybees so that they could have honey to sweeten their food. In those days, people made a place for the bees to live by coiling straw into this shape. Later, beekeepers built boxes like these for their bees. These boxes are called beehives. They are better than the coiled straw because the boxes have these frames that can be taken out. Soon after bees were brought to this country, some escaped and lived in places like hollow trees. In places where it didn't get too cold, some lived out in the open. Most of the bees that make our honey live in beehives like these. Inside the hive, the bees use wax from their own bodies and shape it into this honeycomb. Bees store honey and raise their young in the honeycomb. Bees are insects. Like all insects, they have three main parts to their bodies. They have 6 legs. The large dark areas on each side of the head are eyes. Bees use the feelers on their heads for feeling and smelling. They live in large groups. Each group is called a colony. Every colony has a queen. The queen is in the center of the picture. She is a little bit larger than the rest of the bees. The queen lays eggs. This is an egg that the queen has just laid. The egg changes and grows into a shape that looks like a worm. The adults feed the young. The worm-like shape changes into a young bee. It crawls out and joins the other bees. Where do bees get the honey they put in the honeycomb? Have you noticed that you often see bees around flowers? Many flowers make tiny drops of a sweet liquid called nectar. Bees go from flower to flower and get the sweet nectar. The flower's nectar is changed to honey in the bee's body. Bees put the honey into the honeycomb. Then they cover the opening with a wax cap. Bees make more honey than they need. Beekeepers put the hives by fields that have flowers with nectar. Farmers often pay beekeepers to put beehives in the farmers' fields. Many plants don't make seeds and fruit unless bees or other insects visit their flowers. The beekeeper puts boxes of empty honeycomb on each hive. The bees fill the honeycomb with honey. The beekeeper then removes the filled frames. He puffs some smoke from burning rags to quiet the bees. The filled frames are taken to a place where the honey is removed. This knife is heated so that it cuts the wax easily. The wax top is heated to get any honey out, and the wax is melted and later sold as beeswax. Beeswax has many uses. It is made into candles and may be used in waxes and polishes. This machine whirls the frames around and around so that the honey is thrown out of the honeycomb. The warmed honey flows out and is ready to be put in jars. The empty frames will be put back into a beehive. The bees will then fill them with honey again. There are different kinds of honey. Honeys from different kinds of flowers have a slightly different taste. When bees get most of their nectar from clover, their honey is called clover honey. Even plants like fireweed make good honey. Bees make a lot of honey from wildflowers. Some people like to eat honey that is still in the honeycomb, so you sometimes see a jar of honey with some honeycomb in it. They chew on the honeycomb the way people chew on gum. Later, they will spit it out. Honey is a food we get from insects. Honeybees are insects. The early settlers from Europe brought honeybees to America. Bees are kept in hives. The bees fill the honeycomb in the hive with honey. the beekeeper takes the honey out of the honeycomb. The honey may have different flavors depending on where the bees got their nectar. Honeybees are insects that help us by helping plants to produce seeds and fruit, and by making the honey we eat.